Hello, my dear listener. Welcome back to Code Your English. I'm really glad you're here today, because this episode touches something many of us feel but rarely talk about. I want you to imagine, just for a moment, what it feels like to move through your daily life almost automatically. Waking up, getting ready, answering messages, doing your work, going home, and repeating the same patterns again and again. Everything functions. Everything moves. Yet something inside feels strangely disconnected. It's almost as if you're watching yourself from the outside, like a passenger sitting in the back seat of your own life. That feeling, that subtle loss of agency, is what I mean when I talk about living on autopilot. The metaphor of autopilot is powerful because it's familiar. In an airplane, autopilot keeps things stable, predictable, and safe. But if the pilot never takes control, the plane might never change direction or reach a new destination. And that's exactly what happens to many of us. We follow routines because they're comfortable. We make decisions because they're expected. We move forward because that's what we did yesterday. The problem is not the routine itself. It's the unconsciousness behind it. When life becomes a series of automatic reactions, we lose the opportunity to choose, to grow, and to transform. This topic matters deeply, especially today, when so many people live in fast-paced, demanding environments. Modern life encourages efficiency, but sometimes efficiency comes at the cost of awareness. We become so focused on tasks, deadlines, and responsibilities that we stop noticing how we actually feel. We ignore our inner voice, dismiss our curiosity, and silence the questions that once guided us. And, without realizing it, we drift through our days with the same emotional script, the same conversations, the same thoughts looping in the background. It's no surprise that many adults reach a point where they feel restless, unfulfilled, or simply stuck, even when everything looks fine from the outside. So in today's episode, we're going to slow down. We're going to take a deep breath and pay attention. Not in a dramatic way, but in a gentle, grounded, reflective way. This will be a calm and introspective session, but also an energizing one, because waking up to your own life is one of the most powerful forms of personal growth. And before we go deeper, let me ask you a question to open that internal space. When was the last time you consciously chose your path, instead of simply following it? What autopilot living really means. When we talk about living on autopilot, we're not talking about something dramatic or unusual. In fact, autopilot is incredibly common, and it happens quietly, almost invisibly, inside our daily routines. It's that subtle state where you're physically present, but mentally somewhere else. You go through the motions, but you're not fully engaged with what you're doing. You respond to situations without really thinking about them, almost as if there's a script playing in the background, and you're simply following the lines. Emotionally, it often feels like a low-level heaviness, not sadness, not stress, but a kind of numbness, a muted version of yourself moving through the day. And this is important. Autopilot doesn't mean you're lazy or careless. It just means your mind has slipped into patterns that no longer require conscious attention. Psychologically, autopilot happens because the brain is designed to save energy. Your mind loves shortcuts, cognitive patterns that help you complete familiar tasks quickly, without using too much mental effort. Think about brushing your teeth, driving the same route to work, or preparing your morning coffee. You don't have to think about every step. The brain has learned the sequence, stored it, and now repeats it automatically. This is efficient, and in many ways, it's helpful. But these shortcuts don't just apply to physical actions. They also apply to your emotional responses. your beliefs about yourself, and even your expectations for the future. Over time, the brain forms loops. This is how I always react. This is what I do. This is who I am. And if you never question those loops, they slowly harden into limiting beliefs. Emotionally, this can be dangerous because it means you stop checking in with yourself. You stop noticing what you actually feel or what you truly need. For example, imagine your morning commute. You get on the bus or train, open your phone, scroll through the same apps, check the same notifications, and listen to the same playlist you played yesterday. Before you know it, 20 minutes have passed, and you can barely remember what you saw or heard. The same thing happens at work. You answer emails, join meetings, follow instructions, and complete tasks automatically. Your body is working, but your attention is drifting. You're reacting to life, not engaging with it. Even in personal relationships, autopilot can take over. You repeat the same conversations with your partner, reply with automatic phrases like, "I'm fine," or "It's okay," and follow familiar emotional habits, even when those habits don't reflect what's inside. A typical example is the way many of us use our phones. We pick them up without thinking, unlock them without purpose, and open apps we don't even care about. The action is so automatic that we often don't realize we're doing it. Another example is the way we walk through stores, cook meals, clean our homes, or even talk to friends. We follow familiar patterns not because they're meaningful, but because they're easy. And this ease is exactly why autopilot becomes so powerful and so limiting. When your brain relies too heavily on shortcuts, you stop noticing opportunities for growth, connection, or change. You begin to assume that your current routines are the only routines available. You begin to believe that the way things are is simply the way they have to be. The problem is not the brain's efficiency. It's the way this efficiency can quietly shape your identity. When a behavior becomes automatic, the internal dialogue behind it often becomes automatic too. If you always react with self-doubt, your mind starts whispering the same doubtful phrases before you even realize it. If you always put others first, your brain reinforces the belief that your needs are less important. If you avoid change, the mind convinces you that you're not ready, not capable, or not the type of person who does that. These internal messages are not always true, but they feel true because they've been repeated so often. And once that happens, autopilot becomes more than a routine. It becomes a mindset, a way of moving through life without questioning your direction or your potential. So when we say, "Stop living on autopilot," what we really mean is step back into awareness. Wake up the part of you that notices, questions, decides, and chooses. Autopilot may keep you comfortable, but it rarely leads you where you genuinely want to go. How autopilot quietly shapes your life. One of the most subtle things about living on autopilot is that it rarely feels dramatic in the beginning. It shows up in small, almost invisible ways, tiny, unconscious choices that don't seem harmful on their own. But over time, these small choices begin to accumulate, and the effect is much bigger than we expect. Autopilot doesn't shake your life all at once. It slowly redirects it. It pulls you a few degrees off course every day, until one morning you wake up and realize you're far from where you intended to be. The real impact of autopilot is not immediate discomfort. It's the slow, quiet erosion of your sense of direction, passion, and purpose. Take your career, for example. Maybe you started your job with excitement, curiosity, and a desire to grow. But months turn into years, and the daily routine becomes predictable. You do what you're supposed to do. You finish your tasks, you attend meetings, and everything works. Nothing is wrong, yet nothing is moving forward either. There's no real challenge, no spark, no sense of progress. You're not unhappy, but you're not fulfilled. Many people call this career stagnation, but the truth is that stagnation rarely feels like a crisis. It feels comfortable, it feels familiar, and that's why so many people stay stuck. Autopilot makes comfort feel like enough, even when something inside them quietly wants more. The same thing can happen in relationships. At the beginning, there's energy, intention, effort. You listen, you notice small details, you express appreciation, you share dreams. But after a while, the relationship slips into routine. You repeat the same conversations, follow the same patterns, and assume you already know what the other person will say. You stop asking deeper questions, and you stop sharing your own. Not because you don't care, but because habit takes over. And slowly, the emotional connection becomes thinner, lighter, less alive. The relationship still functions. You cooperate, you support each other, you live together. But it lacks warmth. This is what I call functional dissatisfaction. Everything is working, technically, yet something feels emotionally undernourished. Another place autopilot shows its power is in your personal dreams. The goals you once imagined for yourself, the projects you wanted to start, or the skills you hoped to learn. Many adults carry dreams that quietly faded simply because there was never a conscious moment to protect them. Maybe you wanted to start your own business, or move to a new city, or learn a new language, or express yourself creatively. But daily responsibilities, financial pressures, and social expectations take priority. You tell yourself, "I'll do it later," and later becomes a habit. Years pass, and the dream becomes harder to imagine because you've lost the emotional energy that once made it feel alive. Autopilot doesn't kill dreams. It just delays them until they disappear. All of this creates a state that many people experience but rarely articulate: emotional numbness. It's that dull feeling when life is not painful, but also not inspiring. You wake up, you do what's required, you fulfill your responsibilities, and at the end of the day you say, "I'm fine." But fine is not the same as alive. Fine is not joy. Fine is not growth. It's a neutral zone, a place where you function efficiently but stop feeling deeply. And when you stay in that emotional space for too long, you start to believe that this quiet dissatisfaction is normal, even inevitable. But it's not. It's simply the result of living without conscious intention. And this brings us to an important rhetorical question, one that I want you to really sit with for a moment. Are you living your life, or simply managing it? The difference is profound. Managing your life means keeping everything under control. Tasks completed, bills paid, responsibilities handled. Living your life means being awake to your experiences, choosing your direction, and allowing yourself to feel passion, curiosity, and meaning. Autopilot keeps you in management mode, not in living mode. It creates a life that is stable, but not purposeful, comfortable, but not fulfilling. When these unconscious patterns continue for years, you may find that the life you're living is not the one you wanted. Not because you chose the wrong path, but because you stopped choosing at all. And that is why waking up from autopilot is not just a psychological action. It's an act of courage, a step toward reclaiming your attention and your agency. It's an invitation to return to yourself. The role of internal dialogue and self-perception. One of the most powerful yet often invisible forces that keeps us on autopilot is our internal dialogue, the constant stream of thoughts, opinions, and judgments that run through our minds. This inner voice has a profound impact on the way we experience life. It can either serve as a guide, gently nudging us toward awareness and growth, or it can lull us back into familiar patterns, convincing us that comfort and repetition are enough. The danger is not in having an internal dialogue. We all do. But in not noticing it, in letting it dictate our choices without question. When we live unconsciously, our thoughts are like an unmonitored soundtrack, shaping emotions, behaviors, and even the trajectory of our lives. Much of this internal dialogue consists of limiting beliefs, those small but powerful ideas that convince us we cannot act, change, or grow. Thoughts like, "I'm not good enough," "It's too late for me to start," or "This is just who I am," quietly influence our decisions every day. They feel true because we've repeated them so often. Some were learned in childhood, others formed through disappointment or failure, and many are reinforced by comparisons with others. These beliefs are rarely shouted. They whisper. They don't demand your attention, but they steer your life as surely as the currents of a river shape its path over time. They become so ingrained that we stop noticing them. And autopilot slips in once again, keeping us from testing new waters or challenging old habits. The inner voice is deeply shaped by context, by family norms, cultural expectations, and professional pressures. Consider the messages many people absorb from a young age. You must follow a safe career path. Don't make waves. Family comes first. Or success is defined by others' standards. These messages, often well-intentioned, can become internalized scripts that dictate how we act, what we prioritize, and how we evaluate ourselves. Professional pressures can reinforce them further. Meeting deadlines, adhering to workplace culture, and striving for promotions can make us believe that efficiency and compliance are more important than authenticity or curiosity. Cultural norms and societal expectations can make us feel that our personal desires are secondary or even selfish. And when these external pressures meet internal dialogue, the result is a complex web of assumptions and limitations that quietly keep us on autopilot. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. To wake up from autopilot, we must pay attention to the stories we tell ourselves, those often unnoticed narratives that shape our identity, behavior, and emotional life. Ask yourself, what do I believe about myself that isn't necessarily true? Which of my truths are inherited from others rather than discovered by me? Becoming conscious of this internal narrative is not about harsh self-criticism. It's about curiosity and clarity. It's noticing the subtle thoughts that guide your decisions and evaluating whether they align with who you want to be. Often, you'll find that the voice that keeps you small is not your own voice at all. It's a collection of echoes from the past, repeated so frequently that it feels permanent. Recognizing this is liberating because it means change is possible. Your thoughts are not destiny. They are patterns that can be observed, questioned, and redirected. Internal dialogue also works in the opposite way when nurtured intentionally. When you choose to speak to yourself with awareness, encouragement, and curiosity, your inner voice becomes a guide rather than a guardrail. Phrases like, "I can explore this," "It's okay to try and fail," or "I am capable of growth" may seem small, but they slowly reshape perception, action, and identity. Conscious self-talk interrupts autopilot by inviting reflection, opening new possibilities, and creating space for intentional action. Your self-perception, which is deeply linked to your internal dialogue, becomes a compass rather than a constraint. When you realize the stories you've been telling yourself are just stories, not absolute truths, you can start writing new ones, stories that align with growth, curiosity, and conscious living. In the end, understanding the role of internal dialogue is about reclaiming agency. It's about noticing the whispers of doubt and the inherited beliefs that shape your choices, and choosing instead to engage with your thoughts actively. It's about breaking the cycle of unconscious repetition, questioning the assumptions that have become invisible, and deliberately cultivating an inner voice that supports awareness, courage, and personal growth. Because once you become aware of your internal dialogue, you take the first meaningful step out of autopilot and toward a life that is intentionally yours. Signs that you're living on autopilot. One of the most challenging things about living on autopilot is that you often don't notice it while it's happening. It doesn't come with alarms or dramatic signals. Instead, it shows up in subtle, almost invisible ways. Small shifts in how you think, feel, and behave. These signs are easy to ignore because they blend into daily life, becoming part of the routine you've accepted as normal. But if you pay attention, you'll begin to see that these small indicators are important messages from within, gentle reminders that something in you is asking for more awareness, more intention, more aliveness. A common sign is the absence of excitement. If you struggle to remember the last time you genuinely looked forward to something, a conversation, a project, a simple experience, that may be a quiet signal that autopilot has taken over. Excitement doesn't always mean big celebrations or dramatic achievements. Sometimes it's just a spark of curiosity, a feeling of interest, a moment when your inner world lights up. But when your days pass by without these moments, you might find yourself moving through life with a kind of emotional flatness. Not unhappy, but not inspired either. Not miserable, but not truly engaged. It's that feeling of existing in a muted version of yourself where everything works, but nothing shines. Another subtle indicator is the sense that your days feel repetitive, almost as if each day is a copy of the one before it. You wake up, do the same tasks, follow the same routines, and end the day without a clear memory of anything meaningful that happened. Life starts to feel like a loop, predictable, efficient, and strangely empty. Many people tell themselves, "This is just adulthood," or "This is what responsibility looks like." But those explanations often hide a deeper truth. You've stopped paying attention to your own needs, desires, and inner signals. When the days feel flat, it's not because life is boring, it's because you're no longer actively engaging with it. A powerful sign of autopilot is the difference between reacting and responding. When you react, you follow your habitual patterns automatically: frustration, impatience, doubt, avoidance, without pausing to understand what's happening inside you. For example, you receive an email that annoys you, and you respond instantly with irritation. Or someone makes a comment you don't like, and you shut down emotionally without questioning why it triggered you. Reacting is automatic and unconscious. Responding, on the other hand, requires awareness. It's the space where you pause, breathe, observe your thoughts, and choose your next step. If you notice that you're reacting more than responding, it may be a sign that your internal world is running on old scripts, not fresh awareness. Another sign, often overlooked, is the feeling of drifting rather than deciding. Drifting happens when you allow external circumstances to choose for you. You let others set your plans. You follow routines without questioning them. You stay in situations that no longer reflect your values. Decision-making becomes passive, even when the decision is about your own life. You might find yourself saying, "I don't know what I want," or "I'll just see what happens." Not because you lack intelligence or desire, but because autopilot has weakened the muscle of intentionality. Over time, drifting creates a sense of distance from your own life, as if you're watching it unfold rather than shaping it. There are more subtle signs, too. Losing track of time, forgetting conversations, feeling disconnected from yourself, or experiencing a constant low-level fatigue that you can't explain. Sometimes you may even sense that you're living your life according to expectations you didn't consciously choose. These are all invitations to pause and check in with yourself, not to judge, not to criticize, but simply to notice. And this is where I want to gently invite you into a moment of self-reflection. Ask yourself, where in your life have you stopped paying attention? Is it your emotional well-being, your relationships, your personal goals, your sense of purpose? These questions are not meant to provoke guilt. They're meant to awaken awareness, to help you reconnect with parts of yourself that may have been quiet for a long time. Recognizing these signs is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of awakening. It means you are beginning to observe your own life with clarity and compassion. Autopilot may have shaped your behavior, but it doesn't have to shape your future. With awareness, even the smallest signal can become a doorway back to intentional living. Breaking the pattern. How to turn autopilot off. Breaking out of autopilot doesn't require a dramatic life change. You don't need to quit your job, move to another country, or reinvent your identity overnight. In fact, the most powerful shifts often come from very small, very intentional actions. Simple moments of awareness that interrupt the unconscious patterns you've been repeating. Think of it like gently tapping the brakes on a moving car. You're not trying to stop everything. You're simply slowing down enough to regain control of the steering wheel. This is how you begin turning autopilot off. Not with force, but with presence. One of the simplest yet most transformative strategies is the practice of micropauses during the day. A micropause is a small moment where you stop, breathe, and reconnect with the present. It might last 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Nothing dramatic. You can take a micropause before answering a message, before opening a meeting, or even while washing your hands. What matters is the intention behind it. Instead of rushing automatically into the next action, you create a moment of awareness. What am I feeling? What am I about to do? Is this what I want right now? These tiny pauses interrupt the unconscious flow and bring your mind back into the driver's seat. Another important strategy is naming your emotions. Autopilot thrives in emotional vagueness, that blurry state where everything feels fine, okay, or whatever. But emotions become clearer when you label them. I feel tired. I feel anxious. I feel restless. I feel hopeful. Naming an emotion doesn't automatically fix it, but it helps you understand it. It opens a space between you and the feeling, allowing you to respond thoughtfully rather than react automatically. Instead of being pulled around by your emotions, you begin to engage with them intentionally. Reconnecting with curiosity is another powerful way to break the pattern. Curiosity is the opposite of autopilot. When you are curious, you pay attention. You ask questions. You notice small details. Life becomes more alive. Try observing something in your environment, a sound, a smell, a movement, and ask yourself, what am I noticing right now? Or approach a routine task, like cooking or commuting, with a beginner's mind instead of rushing through it. Try to see it as if you were experiencing it for the first time. This simple shift can transform ordinary moments into meaningful ones. Intentional decision-making is another key element. Autopilot thrives when decisions are passive. Breaking the pattern means reclaiming the habit of choosing. Instead of automatically saying yes to every request, try asking yourself, do I actually want to do this? Instead of repeating a routine because it's familiar, try asking, "Does this still serve me?" Intentionality doesn't require perfect clarity. It simply requires awareness. Even a small decision made consciously, choosing a different route home, changing your morning routine, or speaking up when you usually stay quiet, can remind your brain that you are capable of directing your life, not just maintaining it. Challenging automatic thoughts is another essential step. When your mind tells you, "This is just who I am," or "Nothing will change," or "I'm not capable," try responding with a gentle question. Is that actually true? Instead of accepting old stories, try examining them. Instead of believing every thought, try noticing which ones are habits rather than realities. Changing your internal dialogue doesn't mean forcing positivity. It means engaging with your thoughts instead of letting them run unchecked. Even one moment of curiosity, "Why do I think this?" can break the cycle. Let me give you a simple, relatable example. Imagine you finish work feeling tired. Normally, you go straight home, open your phone, scroll for an hour, and tell yourself you're unwinding. But tonight, you pause. Just for a moment, you ask yourself, "What do I really need right now?" Maybe the answer is a short walk, a glass of water, or a quiet moment on the balcony. Instead of collapsing into the usual routine, you choose something small but conscious. And in that small choice, something subtle shifts. You're no longer following the script. You're rewriting it. That's what breaking autopilot looks like. Not big heroic actions, but gentle interruptions, micro-pauses, named emotions, curiosity, intentional decisions, questioned thoughts. These small, conscious steps create openings in your day, tiny spaces where you reconnect with yourself. And through those openings, life becomes clearer, more meaningful, and more fully yours. Reconnecting with your values and authentic desires. When we talk about living more consciously, we are ultimately talking about rediscovering what truly matters to us at the deepest level. It's very hard to change your patterns or break free from autopilot if you don't know the direction you actually want to move in. Many people feel lost, not because they lack motivation, discipline, or energy, but because they're disconnected from their values, the internal compass that quietly guides their choices, priorities, and behavior. When your values aren't clear, every decision feels heavier, every opportunity feels confusing, and every setback feels more personal. But when you reconnect with the things that genuinely matter to you, something subtle but powerful shifts. You begin to live with alignment rather than confusion, with purpose rather than pressure. This idea of alignment might sound abstract, but it's incredibly practical. Alignment simply means that what you think, what you say, and what you do are pointing in the same direction. You're not forcing yourself to live by someone else's expectations, and you're not performing a version of yourself just to gain approval or avoid conflict. Instead, you're making decisions that actually reflect your identity, your history, your dreams, and your emotional truth. When you act in alignment with your values, you naturally become more resilient. Setbacks don't break you as easily because you know why you're doing what you're doing. You're not just reacting to life. You're responding with intention. For many people, however, it has been years since they last asked themselves what they truly want. Cultural expectations, family pressures, social comparison, or professional norms often shape our choices more than we realize. You may feel obligated to follow a certain career path, maintain a specific lifestyle, or behave in ways that keep the peace rather than honor your inner voice. Over time, these external influences can drown out your authentic desires, leaving you unsure about who you are beneath all the expectations. This is why reconnecting with your values is not just a reflective exercise. It's a process of reclaiming your identity. A helpful way to begin this process is to ask yourself a few powerful, honest questions. For example, what do you care about deeply? Not what you think you should care about, not what your family wants you to care about, but what genuinely moves you emotionally. Another important question is, what kind of person do you want to become? Notice that the question is not about achievement, status, or success. It's about character. Do you want to become more patient, more courageous, more open-minded, more creative? These qualities often reveal your true values more clearly than any checklist or career plan. You might also reflect on moments in your life when you felt fully alive, engaged, or proud of yourself. What were you doing? Who were you with? What parts of yourself were being expressed in those moments? Often, our best memories point directly to the values that matter most to us. If you felt alive while helping someone, service might be one of your values. If you felt proud while learning something challenging, growth might be one of your values. If you felt peaceful while spending time alone in nature, simplicity or freedom might be part of your inner compass. These clues are important because they remind you that your values are not invented. They are discovered. Here is a simple reflective exercise you can try, even while listening. Take a slow breath and picture your life 1 year from now. Imagine yourself living more consciously, more intentionally, and more authentically. Now ask yourself, what has changed? What did you stop pretending? What did you start honoring? Which part of your life finally feels aligned with who you really are? Notice the emotions that rise when you imagine that future. Those emotions are signals. They show you what you have been longing for, maybe for a very long time. Reconnecting with your values isn't about creating a perfect life or making dramatic changes overnight. It's about slowly and gently shifting your choices, behaviors, and mindset in the direction of what feels authentic. It's a process of remembering yourself. And once you begin that process, autopilot loses its power. You start to live awake, aware, and deeply connected to your own truth. Designing a more intentional life. Designing a more intentional life begins with a shift from simply understanding yourself to actively shaping the way you move through the world. Introspection gives you clarity, but intention gives you direction. Once you've identified your values, desires, and the areas where autopilot has been quietly in control, the next step is to create a life that reflects this new awareness. Intentional living doesn't require dramatic reinvention. It's about making small, conscious choices that align with who you want to become. Over time, these choices form the foundation of a life that feels purposeful rather than accidental. One of the most powerful ways to cultivate a more intentional life is by developing sustainable habits. Many people imagine habits as rigid or restrictive, but intentional habits are actually supportive. They create structure without suffocation. Think of them as gentle anchors that keep you connected to your goals, even on days when motivation disappears. A sustainable habit is not something you force yourself to do. It's something you design to work with your natural rhythms. For example, instead of promising yourself that you'll wake up 2 hours earlier every day, you might start by dedicating just 5 minutes each morning to breathing, journaling, or stretching. What matters is not the size of the habit, but the consistency and the meaning behind it. Mindful routines also play a significant role in intentional living. A routine becomes mindful when you bring presence, attention, and appreciation into it. Even simple daily actions, making coffee, walking to work, preparing dinner, can become moments of grounding if you choose to slow down and engage with them fully. Many people imagine mindfulness as something that requires meditation cushions or long retreats, but often it's just about doing one small thing with awareness, instead of rushing through everything on autopilot. When you treat routine as a conscious practice instead of a mechanical sequence, you begin to feel more awake in your own life. Another important dimension of intentional living is identity level change. This means shifting your perspective from "what should I do?" to "who do I want to be?" Many people focus only on behaviors. I should exercise more. I should procrastinate less. I should be more organized. But behavior alone is fragile. It collapses the moment stress, fatigue, or doubt shows up. Identity, however, is stable. When you start to think of yourself as someone who values clarity, or health, or learning, your actions naturally follow. You don't have to force yourself to act differently. You simply act in alignment with the identity you're shaping. The change becomes deeper, more natural, and more resilient. This shift from doing to being is one of the most transformative elements of living intentionally. Doing is often driven by pressure, deadlines, and expectations. Being is driven by authenticity and self-connection. Doing asks, "What tasks should I complete?" Being asks, "What kind of energy do I want to carry into the day?" Doing focuses on results. Being focuses on character. Of course, both matter. But when your actions emerge from a grounded sense of who you are, they become more sustainable and more meaningful. You no longer chase achievements to prove something. You pursue goals that express something. To build an intentional life, you don't need grand gestures. You need small, deliberate shifts. Tiny choices accumulate quietly but powerfully. Choosing to pause before reacting. Choosing to say no without guilt. Choosing to rest without shame. Choosing to speak honestly rather than politely. These small acts of intention slowly reshape the texture of your life. You begin to notice that you're no longer drifting. You're steering. You're no longer sleepwalking through your days. You're awake to your own experience. Imagine, for example, a moment when you reach for your phone out of habit. Instead of automatically scrolling, you take a breath and ask yourself, "What do I actually need right now?" Maybe it's rest, maybe it's connection, maybe it's clarity. Choosing a different response, even once, creates a tiny but meaningful interruption in the pattern of autopilot. These interruptions are where transformation begins. Designing an intentional life is not about perfection or performance. It's about awareness, alignment, and gentle but persistent effort. With every small shift, you begin to live in a way that reflects your values, honors your desires, and supports your growth. Over time, intention becomes not just something you practice, but something you embody. As we reach the end of this episode, I want to bring everything we've explored together into one clear and meaningful thread. Throughout our time today, we've moved through a quiet but powerful journey, one that began with awareness, expanded into deep reflection, and finally opened the door to intentional action. In many ways, this journey mirrors what it means to wake up from autopilot first. You notice the patterns. Then, you question them. And finally, you begin to choose differently. Nothing dramatic. Nothing overwhelming. Just a series of conscious steps that slowly reshape the way you live, think, and feel. This path towards intentional life design isn't a sudden transformation. It's a gentle returning to yourself, a process of remembering who you are and who you want to become. As you reflect on the ideas we've discussed, the quiet habits, the cognitive shortcuts, the internal dialogue, the values you've forgotten or postponed, I want you to hold on to one simple, empowering truth. You don't have to change everything at once. but you do have to wake up to your life. Autopilot is comfortable, familiar, and incredibly persuasive, convincing you that fine is good enough, and that later is always an option. But your life is not something to be brushed aside or postponed. It deserves your presence, your curiosity, your intention. Even one moment of awareness, one breath, one pause, one new choice, can interrupt the patterns that once felt automatic and unchangeable. Change begins the moment you decide to pay attention. Before we close, I want to invite you into a moment of personal reflection. Not pressure, not expectation. Just an honest check-in with yourself. What is one small, conscious choice you can make today that brings you closer to the life you want to live? It could be something as simple as taking a 5-minute pause, sending a message to someone you care about, choosing a healthier response to stress, or finally, giving yourself permission to rest. Your action doesn't need to be big. It needs to be intentional. Ask yourself this question sincerely, without judgment, and allow the answer to surface naturally. This single choice, however small, is the first step out of autopilot and into conscious living. And remember, the journey doesn't end when the episode finishes. In many ways, this is where the real work begins, because awareness only becomes transformation when you continue the conversation with yourself. You might choose to revisit parts of this episode, especially the sections that made you pause or feel something. You might take a few minutes tonight to journal your thoughts, capture your insights, or write down the patterns you want to leave behind. You might even share your reflections in the comments, not just for others, but for yourself. Because articulating your thoughts is a powerful form of commitment. When you put something into words, you bring it out of your mind and into the world. So, as we close today's episode of Code Your English, I want to leave you with gratitude and encouragement. Thank you for spending this time with me, for listening with openness, and for choosing to show up for yourself in this small but meaningful way. If this conversation resonated with you, if it gave you a moment of clarity or a spark of motivation, I invite you to stay connected. Like the episode, leave a comment, share your experiences, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future discussions designed to help you grow. Not just linguistically, but personally. Every episode here is created with the intention of supporting your English learning journey in a way that feels human, relevant, and transformative. Take a breath, take a moment, and take one conscious step today. Your life is happening now, and you deserve to live it with awareness, courage, and authenticity.